So we'll talk about the Mule for Norwegian and the Family, the second book of it, but we'll talk about the intermission first. Yeah. So the intermission begins with an explanation of why you chose the broken up sections of Original Sin, and then it goes from there to explain the epigraph for the Lady from Shanghai quote that gets it from the end of Lady from Shanghai. Then it gets into a bunch of alternate epigraphs. Can you explain the technique behind that? Because it's a nice little break in between, a massive chronicle of this book, but it also has an innate purpose in showing different ways to look at what came before and after.
Well, since I had started off the book, and the conceit of the book is that there's a lot of film involved, as we talk here in 2016, we've passed sort of the DVD era. In the late 20th century, movies went from just being seen in movie theaters to being on home video cassettes, then to DVDs in the mid to late 90s, which lasted about 10 or 12 years until 09, 2010, when streaming started coming on. But DVDs had their golden age in the first decade of the 21st century. And in doing so, you would get a lot of behind the scenes things, how this movie was made, a lot of talking head experts talking about an important film historically, or the current actors and directors basically giving each other hand jobs about whatever shit film they had made. So I wanted to basically talk about the book and the making of the book, and so I wanted to talk about why the epigraph was chosen, why the Jeffers poem was broken up, and so doing that was interesting. Then the alternate epigraphs. This is going back to Moby Dick, which opens up with a number of epigraphs about the whale. So I wanted to do something similar in here. And in this intermission, these were legitimate epigraphs. I had whatever it is, 15, 20, 30 of them that I was thinking of using at various points in the book. But since I didn't use them in the book, I figured I'd give an alternate of things, why things. So it gives you see the influence of people like Isley and W.B. Yeats. Then some bullshit commercials, radio spots that are leftovers from the opening of the book, which had trailers and teaser trailers and whatnot. And it's basically then goes back because in between long films like David Lean epics or some long foreign films in the 60s and 70s, you would have intermissions in a movie where you'd have 5 or 10 minutes and you'd see what looked like a curtain on screen and blah blah, some music playing. And so basically that was just it. So that was the idea of having this intermission, is to just uh, sort of give that sense of sort of what Melville does about whaling and the making and the structure of boats and crews in Moby Dick. And Moby Dick is a book and a work that has always been a touchstone for me. Just thinking about, for example, this current or this coming up sci-fi book that I'm going to do, another book that has always been big with me has been Pinocchio. And Pinocchio is the touchstone book for my kids' book. But it's also going to be an interesting book, and also La Dolce Vita, the film. So three of the biggest influences are Melville's Moby Dick, Pinocchio by Carlo Collodi, and Fellini's La Dolce Vita, which I think is probably the greatest film that I've ever seen. Even though I don't think Fellini is the greatest director, that single film, though, I think is the film that does the most in the most areas. And that figures in the spy book. But Pinocchio is going to figure in my sci-fi book because I've got this idea of this sentient creature living in outer space that's going to be similar to the whale that swallows Pinocchio and Geppetto in the book. In the original Italian book of Pinocchio, it's called the Pisciacani, or the dogfish, and so this creature, interstellar creature that's going to be living between certain stars in a star system that the hero has to get to, is going to be called the dogfish, and there's going to be references. So I always like doing that kind of stuff. My work is filled with allusions to works and writers and artists and films that I have admired. As I said before, I freely admit where I steal things from, and then rework them, stealing being different than plagiarism. So this is just sort of one of those. This is like the equivalent of like if you go to a movie theater, but before now they don't have intermissions, but you'd see, and DreamWorks presents behind the scenes, and you'd have your little popcorn commercials, and then you'd see a little star giving a thumb up and doing a little 30-second bullshit. Oh, this is the greatest movie ever. So this just continues the pattern that started to open the book.
That's a unique trilogy of films. All three, I mean, not films, but influences. All three figure sea monsters in them too. With Moby Dick with the whale, obviously, and Pinocchio.
I didn't even think of that, but that's interesting. The dogfish, the sea monster at the end, the giant manta ray, and then the whale. So that's interesting. Maybe I'll have to throw in an octopus or a cephalopod in some final.